Africa has changed the global energy map, and almost nobody in the West saw it coming. For over a century, Europe has relied on Africa for raw materials but controlled the supply chains, dictated the prices, and shaped the flow of global energy. But now, a new project is quietly emerging across the continent. A project so massive, so coordinated, and so strategically important that it could flip the entire global power structure on its head. This is Africa's unified continental power grid, a cross-border energy network that links the Sahara's solar megafarms, the Congo River's hydroelectric potential, East Africa's geothermal reserves, and Southern Africa's massive wind corridors, creating the world's largest clean energy ecosystem, one that no foreign power can control. And here's the part that has sent shockwaves through Europe. Africa's new power grid will allow African nations to trade energy with each other. Instead of exporting cheap raw materials to Europe, it will power African industries at home. Instead of fueling European growth, it will allow Africa to determine its own energy prices, its own technology partnerships, and its own infrastructure future, without Western gatekeepers, middlemen, or political pressure. For the first time ever, Africa will control not just its resources, but the infrastructure that transforms them into economic power. Europe knows exactly what that means. For decades, European influence in Africa has rested on two pillars: dependence on European energy buyers, dependence on European infrastructure financing. But the African power grid destroys both pillars at once. It ends dependence, it ends leverage, it ends control, and it begins something the world has never seen before: a fully interconnected African energy superpower, where electricity does not travel through Europe, where revenue does not leave the continent, and where development is not dictated by foreign powers. This is the story of how Africa built the world's most ambitious energy network, how Europe reacted behind closed doors, and how this one project could reshape global power for the next 100 years. Because the truth is, if Africa controls energy, Africa controls industry. And if Africa controls industry, Africa becomes unstoppable. For decades, Africa supplied the world with minerals, oil, gas, and raw materials, but very rarely controlled the downstream industries powered by those resources. European economies in particular grew wealthy by refining African oil, processing African minerals, and exporting high-value goods back to the continent. But in the last 5 years, this dynamic has begun to collapse. A quiet revolution has been taking place, not in political speeches or diplomatic meetings, but across deserts, rivers, dams, and high-voltage lines stretching thousands of kilometers. This revolution is the African Continental Power Grid, a plan backed by the African Union, BRICS partners, energy giants, and dozens of national governments, all determined to build the world's largest interconnected clean energy network. Europe was not invited to lead it. Europe was not allowed to shape it. And Europe cannot stop it. The idea is simple, but groundbreaking. Connect African countries to a single energy backbone. This grid would be fed by Sahara solar megafarms capable of powering half of Europe, the Grandinga Dam on the Congo River, the largest hydropower potential on Earth, Ethiopia, and Kenya's geothermal fields, Morocco and Tunisia's massive wind basins, Southern Africa's solar wind hybrid zones. The result? A continent that produces more energy than it consumes and sells the surplus across borders. For the first time in modern history, countries without oil gain energy independence. Countries without hydropower gain stable electricity. Countries without fuel become exporters. This changes everything. Europe's influence in Africa has never depended purely on diplomacy. It relied heavily on energy dependency. Many African nations sold crude oil and gas to Europe at low prices. Europe earned billions refining and reselling that energy. Infrastructure dependency. European banks financed dams, transmission lines, and ports, controlling the terms and often the political conditions. Technology dependency. European companies provided the turbines, the grids, the pipelines. But Africa's new power grid ends this entire system. Why? Because the energy is processed inside Africa, not exported cheaply. The infrastructure is financed increasingly by BRICS banks, African sovereign funds, Middle Eastern partners, local private sector investors, and the technology is now coming from China, South Korea, Turkey, India, South Africa, Europe no longer has a monopoly. The Sahara solar belt. Algeria, Niger, Egypt, Mauritania, and Morocco are building the largest solar corridor in human history, over 2.3 terawatts of potential output. Europe once tried to secure this energy for itself. Today, those plans are gone. The energy will stay in Africa. The Grand Inga Dam. Located in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the Inga system has enough power potential to light half the continent. Instead of sending electricity to Europe through foreign-owned routes, the new plan is Africa First. Power African industries. Power African tech zones. Power African manufacturing. Only then will the surplus be exported. The East African geothermal arc. Kenya, Ethiopia, and Djibouti are building the world's most stable geothermal network, capable of producing energy 24/7 with zero emissions. This destroys the old dependency on European fossil fuel imports. The Southern Africa supergrid. South Africa, Namibia, Botswana, and Angola are merging solar, wind, and hydrogen into a massive cross-border green energy system. Europe wanted hydrogen contracts. Africa wants energy independence. The key is interconnection. Europe's influence depended on bottlenecks. European ports, European refineries, European trade routes, European financing. But when African countries link directly to one another through their own grid, electricity bypasses Europe. Trade bypasses Europe. Financing bypasses Europe. Technology bypasses Europe. The continent becomes self-sufficient. Europe loses its leverage. With a unified power grid, Africa can finally run smelters, build semiconductor plants, develop electric vehicle industries, expand AI data centers, power megacities, support manufacturing hubs. Energy is the foundation of modern industry. Whoever controls energy controls the future. For the first time ever, that power belongs to Africa. Europe, quiet concern. Policy papers warning of geopolitical realignment. Reduced access to cheap energy. Rising pressure to negotiate rather than dominate. China, full support. Massive engineering partnerships. Long-term energy technology agreements. Middle East, investment wave. A chance to diversify into African green energy. United States, caught off guard. Trying to stabilize influence through diplomacy and private sector deals. Africa, confidence, unity, momentum, an understanding that the future is no longer imported. It is built on African soil. The African continental power grid is more than an infrastructure project. It is a declaration of independence, a rejection of colonial trade patterns, a step toward continental sovereignty, a new model for global development. Europe cannot reverse it. The world cannot ignore it. And Africa will not slow down. The continent that once powered Europe's rise is now powering its own. And this time, the energy and the future will stay in Africa.